Final Fantasy. Truly a historic game, with its influence felt as a whole across the entirety of the RPG genre. Final Fantasy is a series very dear to me, the same being true for a lot of you, I'm sure, which is why I wanted to do this particular video. This particular game, the game that launched 1,000 RPGs, so to speak, is not the game I started off with. No. The first 3 games I remember playing were with my brother, Final Fantasy 7, 8, and 10. So why am I playing the pilot game now instead of revisiting the first games I played? If I'm being honest, the pilot game is only a game I played in passing on the PSP a few years ago. As a matter of fact, I do believe I only made it to the front gates of Elfheim the first time around, having given up after being grounded from the game system for the umpteenth time. Admittedly, I could not escape being grounded frequently. Truth be told, I've only beaten one game my entire life and it wasn't Final Fantasy. Actually, it was Kingdom Hearts. So the simple answer is that I want the whole experience of the game that shot Square Enix into the limelight. If you want a history of Square and Final Fantasy, I'd recommend watching the 2-part series made by Final Fantasy Union called The Complete History of Square. I found it very informative. Personally, I'd much prefer to drone on and on about our current game. As an outline, I'd like to give a brief description of the story, then I'll give my thoughts on what I've played so far. Just being out of the Babylands, I would say my thoughts aren't very big, to be honest with you. But I digress. Let's now begin the story of Final Fantasy. The narrative begins in Cornelia, where 4 youths carrying crystals are in audience with the king. It is brought to light here that these 4 youths are the prophesied warriors of light, fated to save the world, and that the beginning of their fate lies in saving the king's daughter, Sarah, from the knight-turned-evil named Garland. Garland has posted up in a very important location called the Chaos Shrine, and plans on using the power within the princess to carry out, well, we don't know. We defeat Garland and return to the king, who now confirms that we are the prophesied warriors of light and constructs a bridge, sending us over to Pravaka. Pravaka, under my assumption, is a major port city that connects you with the rest of these cities scattered along this smaller ocean. It is in this city that the party defeats a band of pirates. The captain of this motley crew recognizes this as a true feat of power and gives you your first ship, which after one grinding session, we use to travel down to Elfheim. When we reach Elfheim, we confirm that the Prince of Elves is in a deep slumber and we need to wake him. Who put the prince in such a deep slumber? That would be Astos, the leader of the Dark Elves. He does so in order to take control of both races of elves as a singular king. After a daisy chain of fetch quests, taking us from a cave south of Elfheim to a cave north of Cornelia, and all the lands in between, we awaken the Elf Prince, who recognizes us as the Warriors of Light and gives us the Mystic Key. This key grants us the ability to open any door. We then use it to claim what's rightfully ours in terms of arms and defense, as well as an unconventional item that helps us to traverse the rest of the world. This unconventional item is nitro powder, and we take it to the dwarves of Mount Duragar, who then use it to blow a hole dead center of this continent, allowing us safe passage to the village of Melmond. It is here that the game truly starts, in my opinion, as when we arrive in Melmond, we're tasked with what I would consider our true quest. It's a line repeated by the denizens of Melmond in their sullen, defeated tone. Restore the crystals to grace. Here in Melmond, we're also tasked with defeating a vampire that's been feeding on the village of Melmond. We find out that both the vampire and our first crystal is located at the bottom of this cave. This cave is called the Earth Cave, and we defeat both the vampire and the lich as we travel down all 5 floors. Upon purifying the crystal at the bottom of the Earth Cave, you notice that the earth begins to heal in that particular area. The monsters don't quite go away as of yet though, because you still have 3 more crystals to purify. And so you continue with your task to restore the crystals to grace. So, what do I think so far? I'd say so far I can say I enjoy the game quite a bit. As you guys have very well borne witness, every single time I say I'll take a break from the game, I find myself opening it back up to move myself further into the story and experience more of the gameplay. I mean, I can make note of, I think, I'm gonna say every single video that I've put out so far in the actual Let's Play, marking when I say, hey, I'm gonna take a break from Final Fantasy and play something else. It almost never happens. I'm not mad about it whatsoever because I absolutely adore the game. I mean, yes, clearly as well, you guys have borne witness, there are things that I find irritating, but those are minor gripes that I can look past because even just being a pilot game, Final Fantasy has so much to offer. I'm not at all surprised that we're working towards 20 plus games. And even then, it's really only just one gripe, and that's the ridiculous encounter rate that you gotta put up with just playing the game trying to get from point A to point B. So if I have to deal with a ridiculous encounter rate just to get through a story, I think I will. We'll also see if this comment ages like wine or like milk later on as we get further into the game itself, because I have the tendency of putting my foot really far in my mouth. So I think I'll go ahead and start story time in this video before wrapping up and closing out. This particular story is pretty much my introduction to Final Fantasy as a whole, and once again it's attributed to my brother. When I reach way back into my memory, I can remember him sitting down in front of his big old CRT TV playing Final Fantasy VIII. I remember there being 4 different discs and thinking, wow, that's a lot of discs. How is it that he is able to switch these discs out without having to power the entire system off? And then it dawned on me. I had sat there and I had watched and waited for a very long period of time just to watch him get to a point where he could switch discs. And as it turns out, at the end of disc 1, you're prompted to move to disc 2, and so on. He didn't even have to turn off the console. I remember being vaguely amazed by that small fact alone, and being completely enthralled by Squall. His massive sword and the revolver chambered within was just phenomenal to me. I remember watching him play for hours upon hours upon hours, and pestering him to let me play, and even pestering him to let me borrow the games themselves, which, to no avail, they were his favorites. In hindsight, I know for certain that I was never going to get a hold of those games from him, and that I was better off purchasing them from our local game shop down the road. But back then, going to the local game shop wasn't exactly a thought that had crossed my mind too much. And of course there were other games that we enjoyed playing together or I enjoyed watching, like Twisted Metal and Vector Man and Sonic the Hedgehog, but none stood out nearly as much as Final Fantasy VIII to me. Because back then, with those eyes filled with wonder, I thought that this was the most real that games could get. Granted, don't get me wrong, technical improvements have definitely proved me wrong, but when you're a child and easily influenced, the only thought that's running through your mind is, this is the best that it's going to get, and this is gorgeous. And everything about that first bit of game was just phenomenal to me, right down to the music. So I can safely say that if it weren't for the fact that I spent so much time around him, I would never have touched a single Final Fantasy game. It's also safe to say that I probably wouldn't have touched an RPG in general, and that most of my interests would have just fallen into the first-person shooter category of games, so really typically. And I am extremely happy that he had that much of an influence over my taste, because I don't think I would enjoy games as much as I do if it weren't for that fact. If you actually click the link that I sent you, buddy, I'm gonna say thank you. So thank you guys very much for watching. This has been a retrospective of Final Fantasy, most of which has been me prattling on about how I got into this series. I did try to keep it at a half and half basis, with the first half being me discussing the first Final Fantasy game, and the other half being me explaining my introduction. I'd like to say, if you guys enjoyed, please leave a like and a subscription. It really does help me out. If you didn't enjoy, I apologize. I will try to do better next time. And leave that dislike and a comment on what I could change. And at this point, I do also have a Reddit page now, so if you want to go on there and shit post or whatever it is that you do on Reddit, please be my guest. Just try to keep it civil. For now, I hope you guys enjoy the rest of your day, your evening, your mid-afternoon, your morning, whatever time it is. For now, this has been a retrospective on Final Fantasy. I will see you guys next time. This is post-edit, Justin, just letting you know that if the video is a little choppy, it's because a lot of this content I wanted to actually put in a video preceding the entire Let's Play of Final Fantasy 1, but I didn't think about it until about halfway through the game. Regardless, once again, if you enjoyed, please leave a like, subscription, and a comment down below. I want to thank everybody who is watching for their continued patience as I try to figure out what it is that I want to do and how I want to run this current channel and what I want to do with this platform. I'll now go ahead and, sign off of the video now. Once again, thank you.